Today we're going to check the runtime implementation for our Substrate node, and if time allows, we can also check the palettes. Okay, so let's read this section. In the previous video we did check on the node implementation and the way the Substrate node template is architected is that it's like a stack of APIs. At the bottom we have our palette. After our palette we have our runtime, and on top of our runtime we finally have our node. But for the node to work, for the node to work, the runtime provides some APIs that the node consumes, or rather, the node needs an API object, a runtime object, to fulfill some functionalities that the runtime handles. So what is the runtime? What does the runtime do for our Substrate node? So in Substrate, the terms runtime and state transition function are analogous. Both terms refer to the core logic of the blockchain that is responsible for validating blocks and executing the state changes they define. So runtime is important for state transitions. Next, the Substrate project in this repository uses Frame to construct blockchain runtime. Frame allows for runtime developers to declare domain-specific logic in modules called palettes. Okay, so Frame is used to construct a blockchain runtime. Let's check what Frame is. Okay. Frame is one of the most powerful tools available to you as a runtime developer. As mentioned in Substrate empowers developers. Frame is an acronym for Framework for Runtime Aggregation of Modularized Entities, and it encompasses a significant number of modules and support libraries that simplify runtime development. Okay, so it's a development library essentially. I will not read all this, but there's a sample code that you guys can come and check out later on your own time. Okay, I'll go back to the code. At the heart of Frame is a helpful macro language that makes it easy to create palettes and flexibly compose them to create blockchains that can address a variety of needs. Review the Frame runtime implementation included in this template and note the following. This file configures several palettes to include in the runtime. Each palette configuration is defined by a code block that begins with this implement palette name, then config for runtime. The palettes are composed into a single runtime by way of the construct runtime macro, which is part of the core Frame support system library. Okay. Let's jump into the code. Frame runtime implementation. Sure enough, we have our runtime, which going to the source, it's a single lib file, which is about 600 lines, essentially 570 not counting the tests. If we check at the outline, configure Frame palettes to include in the runtime. So essentially these are palettes as discussed here, we have an implement, then the palette name, then its config for runtime. So frame system is a palette aura, palette grandpa, palette timestamp. Okay. Here we have parameter types, which create new implementations of the get street. Okay. I will not go into this, but essentially what it does, it creates new implementation of the get street. Okay. Then we have constant declarations. Okay. I'd like to say that what you're looking for is the node consumes an API, a runtime API. This could be a single struct or just a public functions, or maybe a single struct that implements certain methods that the node requires. So I think we can jump through all this and look at okay, here we have it. We have a construct runtime macro, which creates the runtime by composing the frame palettes that were previously configured. Okay, so it creates a runtime with a given name and given palettes. Note that some of these palettes can be switched for other different palettes. Like in the previous example, we discussed about the grandpa. Okay, I can't remember what we did discuss. Let's check. What do I call it? Stack Overflow. Aura. I think this was it. The answer we got was block final. Yeah, it was a block finalization method. We use grandpa, but perhaps we might want to use something different. Here we used aura, but maybe we might want to use babe. And if you check, we are using aura as a palette for our runtime. Perhaps if you want to use this one called babe, it can also be done. Like it's changed. It can be interchangeable. So palettes are like palettes are those pieces of independent logic that can be changed, just like you can change the wheels on a car. Essentially, that's the best explanation. Let's check it. Yeah, the bottom. Okay, here we have implement runtime APIs, which is a macro that generates the necessary code given the APIs we need. Like in this first one, there is a SP API called block for runtime. So the core trait needs a version, an execute block, and an initialize block. So that should be implemented. So that is implemented. What I don't get is why we have runtime implementations wrapped within implement runtime APIs macro. If I collapse everything just to make sure, okay, so all these are runtime is being implemented for this specific palette, if I can say that. Yeah, then if I navigate to the implement runtime APIs, what does it do? Okay, let me check this. Implement runtime inner. Okay, so we need a dispatch function. This. Okay, I won't say understand anything, but I understand like 40% of it, and generally this code is sort of universal, and this code is sort of a code that we do not need to write ourselves, but is already a primitive of the substrate ecosystem, of the substrate ecosystem. Yeah, and what we are providing here is actually program specific and logic specific, if I get that correctly. If I go to the preview, the palettes are composed into a single runtime by of construct runtime. Let's check construct runtime. Okay, let me. Okay. Copy paste. Okay. Okay, here it is. Create runtime by composing from palettes. The palettes are composed into a single runtime by of construct runtime macro, which is part of the core frame. Okay. I think I can end the video here. At least we have a general a sort of small understanding of how the runtime works. Essentially, you compose your runtime using palettes, and the palettes are bits that are interchangeable, and a good analogy is like changing the tires to your car. And most of the runtime provides like a template of what it needs. Say we need finalization, not really finalization. Let's say we need a block authoring mechanism. Here we're using Aura, but I'm sure we can interchange that and use the babe. We can use the babe mechanism instead. So like essentially while doing those small bits of bits of implementation, everyone's constructed runtime can be different depending on the use case. And we have macros that help a lot with generating code, generating palette specific implementations of the runtime API. Yeah, I think our time is spent, and the next time we'll discuss on the palettes, and then finally I'll go ahead and try to think of a project we can do using this small bit of information That way we can really get our hands dirty and create something. If you have any ideas of what application you'd want us to maybe try out using the Substrate template as a starting point, feel free to drop a comment in the feel free to drop a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.